Hi, this is Bob Barr, bringing you another edition of Liberty Guards, Bob Barr's Laws of the Universe. Now, we've already discussed a number of these laws of the universe. Today, we're going to be looking at one that has to do with a particular policy of the U.S. government that is ongoing right now. The law of the universe that we're going to be talking about today is law number 95. Now, law number 95, it's a little bit longer than some of them, so bear with me. Bob Barr's Laws of the Universe, law number 95, says that if the government does not know what it's doing when it starts something, it will not know what it's doing when it finishes or when it ends. So if the government begins a policy or a program or sets in motion some sort of action at a particular time and it doesn't know what it's doing, well, later on, when that policy, that program, that action ends, the government still won't know what's going on. The example that I'd like to talk about briefly today is the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. We have been involved in Afghanistan in a major way and spent hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in Afghanistan since we first set foot there shortly after 9/11. That is 20 years ago. At the time, it was very unclear what exactly the U.S. military was doing in Afghanistan. Now, it's one thing to say we need to send some military personnel and some covert action personnel over to Afghanistan to track down the Taliban or others who were responsible for the attacks of 9/11. That's perfectly legitimate. The problem is what we wound up doing is sending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops to Afghanistan, basically on a permanent basis. It lasted for 20 years. So we set up these massive air bases and other facilities where we worked with the Afghan military and civilian authorities, presumably, although this was unclear also, to give them the tools and the ability to fight the Taliban and other terrorist groups on their own. The problem is there was never clarity to what we were doing, why we were there with such a huge commitment for such a long period of time. And now that the U.S. is beginning its withdrawal from that policy and program and military operation that was never made clear in the first place, there is tremendous confusion. For example, one of the top, if not the top, U.S. generals who headed the NATO operations in Afghanistan, General Austin Scott Miller, expressed shock that the Afghan forces were immediately starting to surrender to the Taliban in those areas where the U.S. was withdrawing. He expressed shock. Well, this tells us a lot about the military, the U.S. military operation over there, that we wouldn't know what's going on or what was likely to happen once the U.S. withdrew and you have all these Taliban that are still there. But it does tell us that the entire operation in Afghanistan was never clear. We just kept pouring money by the billions into Afghanistan, constructing all of this infrastructure. And yet, when the time comes to leave, the whole thing apparently is falling apart. So it illustrates perfectly what we see in so many other areas as well, that if the government doesn't know what it's doing when it begins an operation or a policy or a program, then it will not know what's going on any better at the end of that program. And Afghanistan is a tragic but very clear illustration of Bob Barr's Laws of the Universe, number 95. So we appreciate your being with us today and urge you to be with us once again when we have our next edition of Bob Barr's Laws of the Universe. This is Bob Barr, and I'd like to thank you for having checked out our program here today. We appreciate your support, your participation, and encourage you to go to libertyguard.org to learn more about our programs and also to help support to further individual freedom and fight against government abuse. One of the ways, but not the only way we do this, is through Bob Barr's Laws of the Universe, but through many, many other programs in support of individual liberty and against government abuse. So please remember to join us. Go to libertyguard.org and join us once again for Bob Barr's Laws of the Universe. Thank you.